We are dealing this week with Parshas Meraglim, with the spies in Parshas Shelach. We're going to bring out, perhaps I hope, a mindset, an understanding. What does it mean, the mitzvah and the hashkafa behind living in Eretz Yisroel, mitzvahs of Yishuv Eretz Yisroel. But I'd like to begin with a question which was put by the Ramban in the beginning of the Parsha. The Ramban asks as follows: V'oid, ma asu ha-meraglim? What did the meraglim do which was so wrong? What was the crime of the meraglim? Ki Moshe amar lahem, Moshe Rabbeinu had said to them, U'risem es ha'oretz mahi, you have a mission to perform, to go into Eretz Yisroel and to tour around and to come back and bring a report. And the question was, and you should see, there's hayeshev aleh, the people who live there. Hechazoku harofeh, if they are strong or if they are weak. Hama'atu, if there are few or if there are many. V'omar lehem habamachanim, and their cities, have a look and examine and investigate where they live, whether they live in fortified cities or in open cities. It would be a proof as to whether they are strong. If they live in open cities, then they rely on their own strength. Or if they're in fortified cities, then they must be weak because they rely on the fortification. V'al kol panim hayu tzrichim lahashiva, says the Ramban. They were required to come back and bring a report. Uma pishon. What did they do wrong? Uma chatosom. Kisha'omru lo, if they said efes ki az ha'om, they came back and reported that no, on no account it's impossible to overcome it because the people are very strong. And if you want to say, says the Ramban, that they said the words which were actually untrue, Eretz Oicheles Yoshvecha, that they eat up their inhabitants, which was false, which was, the Ramban later says, that was untrue. Nevertheless, Ki Terem Shiomi, before that was said, already before we came to the line that they eat up their inhabitants, that they are like murderers and they are violent, before he came to that, Hayamarivas Kolev, already Kolev, the famous words by Yahas Kolev, Kolev silenced them. Already we see at that point. And then he goes further, the Ramban, and asks further on what was the crime, what was the transgression of the meraglim. If you would say that Heimasu es lavoveinu, that they weakened their spirit, they took around all their initiative of going into Eretz Yisrael because they frightened them with their report. But after all, says the Rama, Moshe Rabbeinu himself said to them as follows: V'hiflik lehem b'choizek, and he told them of the great difficulties that you'll have in going to Eretz Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, ato ever hayom es hayardein, you're going into the Yardein. Lo reshes goyim gedolim v'atzumim mimcha, and they're great and strong nations. B'nei Anok asher yodato v'ato shomato, mi yisyad seiv lofonov, who can stand in front of them. So Moshe Rabbeinu also said words like that. So why is it that they're meraglim, the spies, are condemned as being Goshoim if all they did is they came back with a true report? Later on, the Ramban says, further on in the Parsha, in Pasuk Kozayin, he explains, Avol Rishon b'milas efes. Says the Ramban, the fault of the meraglim is that they said the word efes, it's not possible. Ki az ha'om, the people are too strong. Shehi moira al derech efes v'nimna min ha'odam she'i efshar b'shum oifen. The meaning of Ephes means it's impossible, there's no possible way that we will be able to go and inhabit and live and conquer Eretz Yisrael. Ve'ein oid Ephes Elokim v'hinei omru ha'eretz shmeinu v'gam zobas cholav u'davosh avol I efshar. It's not going to be possible. Avol lavoy alem ki ason, because the people are so strong, because they are mighty people b'nei anak. But in reality, even if the Ramban says, we can ask further, that it's because they said it's impossible. It was their opinion. They came back and they brought their report. This is what the results which they discovered at the end. Asks the Rosh Hashiva of Ofakim, Reb Chaim Kamil, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha. Even so we can ask, so what did they do wrong when they said that it's just too hard, it's beyond our powers to overcome the people, the inhabitants of Canaan? Even so, can we be samech on a nes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help us? Can we rely on a miracle? Perhaps they were correct, and they thought that it was just impossible, aderech hateva, on the normal, natural ways of who they are and who we are. We can't possibly go in. So still we can ask the question, what was wrong in saying efforts? It seems impossible to us. Rav Kamil gives the following answer by using a Gemara in Brochus Daf Hey Amud Aleph. The Gemara says a meimra, a statement said by Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Tanya Reb Shimon Bar Yochai Omer. Shloisha matonos nosan toivos nosan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. There are 3 good gifts, a matona, toiva, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Klal Yisrael. V'kulan lo nosnon ela al yedei yisurin. But each of the 3 are given only through difficulties, through hardship. Ve'elu hein, Torah, Eretz Yisroel, v'ha'olam haba. These 3 are there. You can't acquire them. You can't make a kinyan, a possession on them, without difficulties. Torah, Olam haba, and Eretz Yisroel. And then the Gemara brings examples. The Maharsha explains, what does it mean that they were gifts? By Torah we say, Ki lekach toiv nosati lochem, I gave to you. I gave you Torah. In other words, Torah is a gift which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives, a matana Torah, but only alidei yisurin, through difficulties. As we know, a person, in order to learn Torah and acquire Torah, needs a great effort, self-sacrifice. The Mishnah says, Pas b'melach toichal, a person not so particular about his food, he'll eat a crust of bread and some water, Val ha'oretz tishon, mesius nefesh, and sacrifice in order to acquire Torah. That's the difficulty. Olam haba, we see, the Pasuk says, Ve'ein nosati lachem es hachayim bes hatoiv, the gift of Chaim. There it refers to Chaim of Olam haba. So again, we see it's a gift. And the difficulties, as one knows, the challenges and the distress which a person goes through in this world, in Olam Hazeh, is all a preparation for Olam Haba. And therefore, the difficulties of Olam Hazeh set you up for Olam Haba, and that's the gift which one receives afterwards. Eretz Yisroel is the same. Eretz Yisroel, we say in benching, Al ha'oretz ha'toiva asher nosan noch, says the Maharsha. It's a gift, but apparently Eretz Yisroel is not given for the luxury, for the pleasure. We'll see a little bit later, and the problems come up when people become too much involved in materialism and consumer items in Eretz Yisroel, that for that, it's not given for that. Through the difficulties of living through Eretz Yisroel, and still living here and growing spiritually, one receives the gift also of Eretz Yisroel. But one important point, which is the answer perhaps to the question of where the Meraglim went wrong. They thought that coming into Eretz Yisroel would be like Dosan and Aviram had said in the times of Korach, Nachalas Soda v'Kerem. It will be like an inheritance for Klal Yisrael, where they'll be able to live and grow produce and build a home, build their homes, and live comfortably and quietly and enjoy their life in a gift of the land of Eretz Yisrael. That's what they thought. Their assumption was wrong. Just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu had cleansed Klal Yisrael and prepared them and supported them and brought them into the Midbar, from Mitzrayim into the Midbar, into the wilderness, they had assumed wrongly that this would now stop once they entered into Eretz Yisrael. And the life of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael would be a life of just a normal life of Api HaTeva, according to nature, with no divine intervention, no siyata d'ishmaya, no help from Hashem. That's what they had thought. And that was a mistake. And that was the pishon, that was their transgression. What actually happened is, perhaps we can say their report was supposed to have been factual, but it turned out to be personal. And in their understanding, they negated the idea that there would be siyata d'ishmaya. And as a result of that, they didn't recognize that Eretz Yisrael is also a gift. Like a person doesn't just buy a ticket for Olam Haba, the person doesn't just acquire Torah without any effort. It's a gift. Hashem gives Torah to people. And therefore, similarly, Eretz Yisrael is the same as well. Let me explain perhaps a little bit more in Torah. It's wrong to assume that in order to acquire Torah, one needs to become an encyclopedia or a wizard or amass an enormous detail of facts, and therefore a person has acquired Torah. No. That's why we say in the morning, one has to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask him, Ki Hashem yiten chokhmah, mipiv das usvuna. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives out chokhmah. And that's the need for bakosha, for the request. And that's the yisurin and the matona which a person asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help him out in his learning Torah. And as a result, you acquire Torah. It's not like studying a master's degree or a PhD and you come out with the title of. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the acquisition of Torah, of the siyata d'shmaya, of the help Hashem gives a person. For example, a Talmid Chacham, to act in the correct way, to understand what he's learning, to apply it, and to teach others. For that you need, it's a gift of Torah. It's not just an intellectual qualification. There's more to it than Torah, and that's the meaning of Ki Hashem yiten chokhmah. He gives out chokhmah. There's a Gemara at the end of Nida, Daf Ayin Amud Beis, where the Gemara brings an incident that the men of Alexandria turned to Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania and asked him 12 questions. And there were different types of questions. 3 of them were dealing with aspects of derech eretz, of the way of life. One of the questions which they asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania, Ma yaseh odom yechkam? What does a person have to do in order to become wise? Said Rabbi Yeshua, Yarbe yeshiva umamay b'schreira. Spend less time in the office and more time in the Beis HaMedrash. They answered and said, Haba asukein v'lo also b'yadam. Many people sat for many hours to become a Talmid Chacham, and they did not become Talmidei Chachamim. What happened? No, said Rabbi Yeshua, but you also have to be Mavakesh from HaKadosh Baruch Hu also. It's not enough like that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps you. Ki mipiv Chochma ubina. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives out Chochma. Says the Gemara, Maika Mashmanon, what did this come to teach you? Ho, below ho, lo sagya. One without the other is not enough. One has to study and apply oneself in order to become a Talmid Chacham. At the same time, you need siyata d'shmaya. It's a gift. Eretz Yisroel is the same. And that is the fault of the spies of the Magdim. They misunderstood what life would be like in Eretz Yisroel. It is the same as it was in the Midbar. They need to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and without that, they wouldn't be making a kinyan, an acquisition in Eretz Yisroel. Because it required turning to Hashem and having divine providence, Hashgacha Pratis, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu helping them on their way in each part of their life and each aspect and period of their life in Eretz Yisrael. This was a fundamental mistake of the spies. They thought life would be natural, like you live in the Midwest in America, or you live on a farm in England, or you have an estate in Australia, and what's the difference between Eretz Yisrael? They thought. The mistake was that, and that's what he means, Ephes, there would be no help from Hashem. It would be purely a matter of a life in like in Chutz La'aretz, but it's not the case. At the end of Shoftim, there is an awful episode called the Pilegesh Begiva. A woman was assaulted, and as a result, it's a long episode if you want to see it in Shoftim Perek 19 and 20, where the whole episode is brought out, and it ended up becoming a civil war in Israel. Over 450 soldiers gathered together to fight against the tribe of Binyamin, and after many ambushes and many sieges and many different battles, over 70,000 people were killed in the war of the Pilegesh Begiva in Shoftim. The Medrash, the Tana de Belial Rabbah, asks, why on earth did this happen? What was the fault in Eretz Yisrael that there should have been a civil war, and also that so many people had died? And the Medrash explains, because living at that time in Eretz Yisrael was like living in Chutz La'aretz. There was little Torah, little mitzvahs. People lived in the land as if they lived anywhere in the world, without any connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were more involved with their farms, with their houses, with their homes, than they were with Torah and mitzvahs. And in the end, the Medrash brings out it was the fault of the Sanhedrin, that the Sanhedrin should have gone round Eretz Yisrael and corrected the people and shown them exactly where they were going wrong. And for that, 70,000 people died. The same problem came out in the beginning of Shmuel. If you remember the episode when the Pelishtim came and fought against Klal Yisrael, And as a result of the battle, the Aron, the ark, was taken and captured and was taken to the provinces of the Plishtim on the coast, Ashdod, Ekron and Gat. These are the places where Ashkelon, where the Plishtim lived. The first night that they took the Aron, they placed it into one of their houses of Avodah Zarah, of idol worship. And there was a large idol there called Dagon. They put the ark next to it. In the morning they came back and the idol, the enormous idol, had collapsed on the floor and his head was chopped off. And they realized it was because of the ark which was there. They moved the ark to another place, and to Gat. And overnight there was an enormous plague of hemorrhoids and the people could hardly move. And they realized it was because of the ark, and they moved it again to another place. Eventually they sent back the Aron to Eretz Yisroel, to the Jewish people, after 7 months of being in captivity. And they actually put the Aron onto a wagon and sent it on its way, and it arrived on the outskirts of Bet Shemesh. As it arrived, the men of Bet Shemesh, in Shmuel Aleph Perek Tes Zayin, saw that the ark was coming closer, and they were rejoiced by Yisamchu when they have a Yuret HaAron, and they went back to work. They were happy that the ark had returned, but it didn't mean much to them, and they just carried on working. A few sentences later, the Novi explains that over 50,000 people died of an epidemic in Bet Shemesh because of the zilzul, the lack of respect that they had for the Aron, for the ark. They looked and they saw and they rejoiced, but that's not the way to treat the Aron. There was a lack of concern for spiritual values, same as the Meraglim. They thought life in Eretz Yisroel was a life of just a normal life of tending your farm and looking after your produce and building your home, and without any spiritual gains. And this was, again, like Pelegish Begiva, like the Meraglim. They made this awful mistake of not thinking what Eretz Yisroel was for and what was the purpose of living Eretz Yisroel, to grow in spiritual acquisitions, to grow with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the reason why the land was given. It's interesting, just following through on the Meraglim, there's an episode which is brought in Yehoshua Perek Yudalet, Perek 14, that after 45 years, Kolev, who had, if you remember, was together with Yehoshua, who brought back a good report, Kolev turned up to Yehoshua and said, I'd like to take over Hebron, which was promised to me as a land that, since I didn't join in the Meraglim, and bring back a bad report. And Kolev turned around and said to Yehoshua, I'm now 85 years old, and I have the same strength and the same vigor, and I can go and capture Hebron. But the words are a little bit different when Kolev turned around and said, V'Hashem oisi, but Hashem is with me. This was the point. Kolev still had that mindset of life in Eretz Yisroel was together with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not a separate life. It's not that we're now on our own, Nachal Asoda V'Kerem, tending your field and living apart from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He still had that mindset. But we learn this was the fault of the Meraglim, this was their mistake, and we see it repeated, unfortunately, tragically, in those times and even in our times. Life in Eretz Yisroel is supposed to be a life of spiritual growth, a living with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is the purpose of Mitzvah's Yishuv in Eretz Yisroel, of living in Eretz Yisroel. If you've ever flown with El Al coming to Israel, as you're looking for your seat and you find your seat, they, as far as I remember, they show a most beautiful film of different sights and scenes in Eretz Yisrael, the mountains of the Hermon, the sea, I think, at Caesarea, the golf course, the buildings of the Azrieli Towers in Tel Aviv, and they show people walking, Christians walking in the Via Dolorosa, and it's a commercial movie to show the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. I think there is a scene of people praying at the Western Wall, but it's basically a secular commercial movie, which really could have been taken in America or France or Argentina, for that matter, are beautiful sights which you see in Eretz Yisrael, but you could see those sights anywhere, beautiful countryside. And it's a major, major mistake. Of course, El Al is not interested in promoting this idea of what's behind the spiritual side of Eretz Yisrael, but that's what it's for, and that's where it's lacking. We learn that Moshe Rabbeinu prayed over 500 times to Eschanan in order to come into Eretz Yisrael. It wasn't just to get a grand vacation or to get to wander around on the beaches of Eretz Yisrael by Tel Aviv. He wanted to gain lecho mipirei v'lisbaya mituva, to eat from the fruit. Interesting, since we mentioned that, there is a machlokes in the Shach, in the Tur, and Siman Reish Ches and Shulchan Aruch, as whether one can say the words in Al HaMichya, le'echol mipirya v'lisbaya mituva, to eat from the fruit and to enjoy its goodness of the fruit, whether Eretz Yisrael is not given for that. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't want to come into Eretz Yisrael just in order to enjoy the fruit. There's more Kedusha than that. And the only reason the Meforshim bring out, the Torah brings out there in Reish Ches, as to why we say that Lashon, because the fruit of Eretz Yisrael, when you say it with the bracha, has in it Kedusha. And the eating, the physical enjoyment, has growth in spiritual terms, because it's the Peiros of Eretz Yisrael, the fruit of Eretz Yisrael. It has more Kedusha to it. We know that the Vilna Gaon tried to come to Eretz Yisrael. Chafetz Chaim tried to come and didn't succeed. Why? What was their point of coming? Because they realized in Eretz Yisrael, as the pasuk says, Einei Hashem elakecha bo, mereishis hashana ad achris hashana. That's the purpose of life in Eretz Yisrael, in order to grow with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the hashgacha behind it. Just to give you an insight, perhaps, of what this means, of how one wanders around Eretz Yisrael and sees the sights around Eretz Yisrael. The municipality in Jerusalem have built, as you probably know, a magnificent bridge in order to contain the light railway which now runs around Yerushalayim. And I remember as it was being built, there was tremendous controversy about how much money was being spent. And people were very angry, the traffic was being held up, and every time you just passed there on a bus or in a taxi, you always used to hear people kvetching and angry and saying, well, who needs this bridge? It costs so much money, what's the point of it? I remember once I was traveling past and people were so angry and upset of the money which was being spent on it and the confusion and the traffic hold up behind it all. I thought as follows. It was near completion. Yerushalayim is supposed to be the Ir David, the city of David HaMelech. And it's actually, the bridge is made in the shape of a harp, which is supposed to remind you of King David. There's a central spire which shoots up, and there are many, many cables on each side. Maybe we can turn it using a ruchniistic, a spiritual side, and look at the bridge in the following way. Yerushalayim is supposed to be a place where heaven meets earth. And that central spire perhaps is directing a person. When you come into Yerushalayim, you should think of your connection with Hashem, and that's the spire which shoots up. And all the different cables at the side, maybe think of them in the different ways in which a person can connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Through tshuva, through shira, through tchina, through bakosha, through zemer, all different ways. The cables perhaps all represent as a marshal, but in order to think on spiritual lines, what does it mean coming into Yerushalayim? And it's at the entrance of Yerushalayim. And maybe that's the purpose of the bridge in spiritual terms, to think of it in the ways of another way of trying to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the purpose behind the bridge. Maybe, I don't know, when you come off the plane and you arrive after customs and you've gone through customs in Yerushalayim and you walk through, maybe one should just mutter under one's breath, I don't know, as soon as you walk through, like you say when you leave the street and come into a shul, Ma toivu halecha Yaakov, Mishkanosecha Yisroel, Va'ani b'roiv chastocha v'veisecha, Va'ani sefilasilocha Hashem eis rotzain. These are to promote a thoughts of, what am I doing here in Eretz Yisrael? What's the purpose of living here? I did not arrive at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. I did not arrive at LAX in Los Angeles. I didn't arrive at Heathrow Airport in London. I came to Eretz Yisrael. And that approach of looking at it not like the Maraglim, not that it's a place where there isn't any spiritual connection, there certainly is, and that's the purpose of coming into Eretz Yisrael. And these psukim, which we say at the beginning of davening, the 42 words, are all meant to change our outlook and give us the correct spiritual outlook when one comes into Eretz Yisrael. But perhaps the most penetrating thought maybe is this. What does it mean, the mitzvah? What does it mean to live in Eretz Yisrael, of Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael? The most widely accepted book in all of civilization is the Bible. The most truthful of all books ever written, of course, is the Bible, the Tanakh. The most important teacher that we have in all of the Tanakh is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe was the teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu gave direction before he died in Parshas Eikev. What does it mean living in Eretz Yisrael? Listen to these words, and there's perhaps a sense of direction and a code of practice. What does it mean to be connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Eretz Yisrael? You should follow the mitzvahs and follow in his words and to fear him. It's Devarim Perek Ches Pasuk Vov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring you into a good land. Look carefully at these words. Eretz Nachalei Mayim, a land full of rivers and brooks, ayonos and springs, utahomos and depths. Yotzim Babiko Bahor, full of water and springs and fountains and rivers in all different places. Eretz Chita Usaira, wheat and barley. Gefen Utaena, wine and figs. Beriman and pomegranates. Eretz Shemen Utvosh, honey. You have all that you need. Eretz Ashela b'miskenus toicha balechem. It's not a land where you will be deprived and you won't have what you need to eat. Lo sechsar kolba, you won't lack anything. Eretz Asher vonecha barzel. It's a land where the stones are made of metal. Umehararecha tachshev nechoshes, and from its hills you will carve out, you will hew out bronze. The Ramban explains here that it refers to that underneath the stones there is earth from which you'll be able to make metal and iron and steel, and you'll be able to build, because you will need to build homes and houses, and that's why there's stone available. The quarries all over, especially in Jerusalem, outside, in different areas you have places where you bring the stone in, and there's plenty of stone in which you can build your homes and your houses. And the Ramban explains, not like in Mitzrayim, in Egypt, where they made homes out of mud and wood. There are no stones there. In Eretz Yisrael there are. You have all that you need. It's given to you. You'll have all that you need. Be careful, says Moshe Rabbeinu. Be careful you don't go off the derech. And what will happen? You'll build yourselves homes, and you'll leave the way. You won't be dedicated to Torah and mitzvahs. You'll look for other avenues of interest, and you'll be caught up in the materialistic society and the consumer society. The Ramban, on the words of Eretz Mehararecha Tachsav Neshoshos, that there is bronze and metal and stone that you can build your homes, but there's no silver or gold. There's no kesef or zav in Eretz Yisrael, says the Ramban. Why not? You don't need it. You have what you need. There is chita and sa'ira. You need to eat. You have gefen u'te'ena, there's food. There's also stone in which to build your house, but you don't need kesef and zav. It's not made for that. The Akedah brings down in Parsha Shelach, that's exactly what Eretz Yisrael is for. There is enough for the supplies of what you need to live without being deprived. Lo b'miskenus toicha balechem. That's the purpose of Eretz Yisrael. Beautiful point of what Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching here. That's the purpose of Eretz Yisrael. That's where the Meraglim went wrong. You're not coming into a land like you're given your farmstead and you have your land, you cultivate your land, whether it's flock, whether it's wheat, whatever type of farming you do. No, you didn't get the point. Of course, that's the reason also for Shemitah. The reason why we have Shemitah is the land is not yours. The land belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you give up the land and you give it back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, only as a sign to show that it's given to you on lease, but not in perpetuity, not for all time. And one has to remember that living in Eretz Yisroel, and that's the purpose of Shemitah. Perhaps one of the greatest proofs of what we're saying also, as a support for this idea of what is Eretz Yisroel for, where in Pelegish Begiva, in the end of Shoftim, where they made a mistake, where the Anshe Bet Shemesh made a mistake, where El Al makes a mistake, where we have to be focused of what does it mean living in Eretz Yisrael. Perhaps the most important point comes when Klal Yisrael first entered into Eretz Yisrael. They crossed over the River Jordan and settled in Gilgal for a while, where they made Pesach, and then they made plans for Kibush Eretz Yisrael, for conquering. And the first city which they came to was Yericho. Yericho was a miraculous event where the people were told to circle the city each day once with the Orain and with the shofars, but not to say anything, just to walk around once each time, and then on the seventh day they would walk around and then sound their shofars, and the walls came down. What's behind this message of Yericho as miraculously being conquered? There was no fight. They took whatever there was they weren't allowed to take for themselves. There was no spoil allowed. It was like a korban oila, Yericho. It was all for Hashem. In Ivrit they would say it was simli. It was giving a direction for what does it mean living in Eretz Yisrael. It will all be on this way. If you follow the ways of the Torah, then like Yericho was a spiritual conquest, so all the land will be like that. Chazal explains, Machlokes, the Go'onim say that Yehoshua wrote Aleinu l'shabeach when he first crossed over the Jordan, but the Rakeach and other Mefarshim explain that Aleinu was written as soon as Klal Yisrael, when the walls fell. When Yehoshua saw what was happening in Yericho, he then said this enormous praise, and inside here is almost like the code of practice which anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael has to understand. What is it here for? Shaloi osanu kegoyei ha'arotzais. We are not made like other nations. V'loi samanu kemishpachos ha'adoma. And we have not been put like the families around the earth. It means a person who lives in England with a British passport, he lives on the ground, and he's English because he lives on the ground. He's attached to the land of England. Similarly with Spain, similarly with America, in any country. The land gives the identity. No, we're not like that. Shaloi som chalkeinu kohem v'goyraleinu kochal hamoinam. Va'anachnu koyrim u'mishlachavim shehu noitei shamayim v'yosei dots u'moshav yakor. We are attached to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The land is a gift. It's a gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's not dependent on the Jewish nation. You can live the life of a Jew because you're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hu Elokeinu ein oid. Eretz Yisrael is where you perform and find a closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But you're not dependent on it like the other nations of the world in order to find your identity. You come from England and therefore you have an English passport. Similarly with any country in the world. But not here. We're not like Mishpachos Ha'adama. Our chelik is a chelik mimal. We are connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Eretz Yisrael is a gift on that basis. That's the reason.